let's park that for the moment, and let's bring in another issue as well. And that is also the issue of a generation that's coming through. I think I heard that this is now 13% of the workforce, what you might call Generation Y, or the 21st century learner. And that essentially is a generation that's grown up with the internet, consuming information essentially online and getting information intuitively by going to the web. And there's a number of studies and research in terms of how this generation, the internet generation, Nintendo generation, you might call it, is behaving. And one very interesting presentation on this has been a video on YouTube called, which you'll see in the bottom corner of this the screen, called A Vision of Students Today, by a guy called Professor Michael Wetch at Kansas State University. And this video has grown in popularity and become, in recent months, viewed by many people. In fact, in the corner there, 2,925,000 people. And what he's done with his social anthropology students is they self-surveyed. They surveyed themselves and looked at how they acquire information. And some of the issues that are happening within technical communication are also affecting the education sector and also affecting publications and journalism as well. And what the group discovered was that they were doing very little reading of paper-based content. What they were doing was a huge amount of reading and consuming of information online, reading hundreds of Facebook pages and grazing rather than doing what you might call deep learning. And linked with this, in the UK, the British government has instigated some surveys into the effects of this on people, and these surveys have been done by somebody called Professor Susan Greenfield. And what she's reported on is that actually this development of acquiring information through multimedia, through online media, is actually changing the way in which the synaptics in the brain for these young people are getting wired. And there's a concept called neuroplasticity of brains. And so the way they're growing up and the fusing of the brain into a process by which they think is different from other generations. Now, some of the reports that she's done painting a rather doomsday scenarios to the consequences of this. I don't agree with some of these doom and gloom aspects that the press in the UK are picking up on this. But it could well be the case that there is a generation coming up that consumes and acquires information and understanding that's different from what's happened before. So, something else to consider in terms of what's going on. So we've got different learners, we've got issues over what we deliver may not be relevant to people, may have become old-fashioned. We've got the issue that people haven't, documentation managers not measuring what they produce to see if it is relevant to users. And we've also got a culture, particularly within the web-based applications, of what Rahal Bailey's called the no documentation culture. That essentially documentation is a symptom of bad user interface. That if something is not correct, like this sign, it would be better to actually move to re-engineer it into a better way than actually provide documentation to help fix it. And you see this manifested on a number of websites where, particularly with SAS, web-based applications, that there isn't any help at all. There might be an introductory video, and there might be a forum for help, but little more than that. No traditional online help that we would expect with other applications. Maybe a forum where you can do a search that's there. Now, most of these applications tend to be for processes which are familiar to users today. So they, for example, might be an accounting process that everyone's familiar with. So they're in some ways able to do this because they're not presenting to users concepts for which they're unfamiliar. So, the question is Tony right? Are technical communicators being bypassed by other departments, by other deliverables to provide user assistance for consumers, for end users? Well, I think he's right and he's wrong. I think there will always be a need to explain technical stuff to non-technical people. I don't think we can go to a non-documentation approach for all applications. In fact, if you look back in history, even the things that we think are so intuitive today that you can't imagine anybody would want any instructions for, such as the rotary dial telephone or the push-button telephone that was introduced in the 1960s. If you look back, and if you look back onto YouTube, there are videos or presentations that were displayed in cinemas, movie theatres in the States to explain to people how to use a rotary phone instead of picking it up and asking an operator how to do things. Information guides on how to make long-distance calls, which traditionally, prior to that, had been chunked through by operators. But although there's this need to explain technical information, it's not a given that it will be technical writers or technical documents that are the mechanisms or the people that deliver it. I think there's a challenge for technical communicators to be relevant and to provide the right information for people. So, if we're moving beyond what we produce today and towards something else, what is that going to be? What is it that we're moving beyond? And that is a tricky question, and I can't promise that I know all the answers to what that is. And I think it's a question that technical communicators are going to strive to answer within the future months and years. But let's look at what we can do and look at what's likely to come through from that. And that's really to look at a number of areas. The importance of the web. Then two economic theories, trusted relationships and attention economics. A third economic theory as well, fitting into the ecosystem. And then to show some examples of technologies that I think are going to be relevant and important in the near future. Okay. So, going back to our survey that we did at the start of this presentation, at the start of this year, one of the questions we asked was, does your